Good evening. My name is Nathan Abbott. I am the General Managing Director for Opera on Tap Houston. We are streaming tonight to Facebook Live, YouTube, and Twitch, simulcasting to Opera on Tap Houston, Good to Pop-Up Houston, Opera on Tap New York City, our parent chapter, and the relaunch of Emmy and Harry's virtual cabaret. What is Opera on Tap? So Opera on Tap is, we are a local chapter of an international nonprofit that brings opera and classical music to people that normally wouldn't have been or usually would be exposed to it. That usually boils down to us singing and performing in bars, coffee shops, parks, airports, playgrounds, pretty much anywhere that'll have us. We aim to bring opera to the people where the people are. Unfortunately, because of the pandemic, that currently means we're at home. So here we are. We'd also like to give great thanks to Good to Pop-Up Houston for sponsoring tonight's event. Good to Pop-Up is a local chapter of the Goethe Institute, which is the Federal Republic of Germany's cultural institute. They are active worldwide, promoting the study of Germany abroad and encourage international cultural exchange, which is what we're doing tonight. Beethoven was born 250 years ago this December. We think he was born December 16th. We base that off of his baptism. He was born December 17th. Generally, at the time you were born, the day after you were baptized, the day after you were born. We're not celebrating it December 16th. That's smack dab in the middle of Christmas season for musicians. And he's been dead for 193 years, so I don't think he'll mind if we celebrate it during the summer. Beethoven led a rather peculiar life, from confusing his dead brother's birth certificate for his own, to his misfortune of missing out studying with Mozart by mere weeks. It seems Beethoven was destined to greatness no matter the circumstances. emceeing tonight's show is Opera on Tap board member Ramin Chaharbaghi. Our clips tonight are pre-recorded, but will be aired in order and aired live. I will be making all of the switches work. So enjoy tonight's program, and I hope you stick around.
Good evening, and thank you so much for joining Opera on Tap Houston and Goethe Pop-Up Houston for our virtual performance celebrating Beethoven's 250th birthday. My name is Ramin Chaharbaghi, and in addition to being one of our co-founding managers here at Opera on Tap Houston, I will be leading us along through each piece, providing just a little bit of information to help you enjoy these German language pieces even more. Before continuing, I'd like to give a special thanks to our pianist Andrea Moot, who will be providing the accompaniment for each of these performances pre-recorded. Let's give her a virtual round of applause, shall we? We begin our evening somewhere in the middle of the illustrious composing career of Ludwig van Beethoven. Born in 1770 in Germany, Beethoven's music falls between two eras of Western classical music: the rational, Enlightenment-inspired era known as classical, and the more emotional, dramatic, and individualistic era called the Romantic period, the 19th century. In fact, many musicologists credit Beethoven with ushering in that latter Romantic period through his more heroic style, and we'll talk about that style more in a moment. Scholars also divide Beethoven's compositional career into three periods. There are the early years when he developed his reputation in Vienna, the middle or heroic years when he developed a more grandiose and narrative or heroic style, and the later years when he spent more time developing musical forms than musical style. The first song on our program this evening, An die Geliebte, falls near the middle or heroic period. Its text, written by poet Joseph Stoll, depicts a tender kiss meant to comfort a distressed lover. Its publication history also arguably reflects the transition from more square, classical-era music to complex, dramatic, romantic-era music. You see, Beethoven's original version of An die Geliebte included a square, duple rhythmic figure in the piano accompaniment, But by the time the song was published, he had revised it to be a more complex triplet rhythm in the accompaniment, perhaps more romantic in style. Today, both versions are performed. Performing An die Geliebte, please welcome mezzo-soprano Luisana Ribas.
Oh, dass ich dir vom stillen Auge in seinem liebevollen Schein mit Träne von der Wange sauge, hält in die Ecke trinkend ein. Wohl hält die Zügen auf der Wange und wird sie heiß der treue Wein. Nun mich sie so im Gruß empfange. Nun sind doch deine Schmerzen mein. Nun sind doch deine Schmerzen mein. Ja, nun sind doch deine Schmerzen mein. Mein.
Thank you for that, Luisana. If Beethoven had been the king of German classical music in the 19th century, then writer Johann Wolfgang Goethe was almost certainly the king of the German written word of the time. Goethe's poetry encapsulated well the ideals of romantic expression. His works were individualistic, passionate, and so introspective that he paved the way for a movement in Romantic Germany called Innerlichkeit, or literally introversion in German. He was one of the best-selling authors of his day. It was little wonder then that just as the public was eager to buy Goethe's books, composers too clamored to set his words to their own music. It's no exaggeration to suggest that Goethe's text may have been set to more music than any other German poet in history. The next two pieces will be presented consecutively because, in fact, they use the same text, taken from Goethe's poetic ode to both spring and love, Mailied, or May Song. The first setting is Beethoven's, and features a typical rolling figure in the accompaniment, designed maybe to evoke a babbling brook. The second setting of Mailied that you will hear tonight is also by a female composer, Fanny Mendelssohn, who was a rare Romantic-era example of a woman busting through the patriarchal hierarchy of classical music at the time. Singing both Beethoven's Mailied and Fanny Mendelssohn's version of the same Goethe poem, please welcome soprano Catherine Good.
Herrlich leuchtet mir die Natur, wie glänzt die Sonne, wie lacht die Flur. Es dringen Blüten aus jedem Zweig und tausend Stimmen aus dem Gesträuch und Freud und Wonne aus jeder Brust. O Glück, o Sonne, o Glück, o Lust. O Liebe, so golden schön, wie Morgenwolken auf jeden Höhen. Du segnest herrlich das frische Feld, im Blütendampfe die volle Welt. O Mädchen, Mädchen, wie lieb ich dich, wie blinkt dein Auge, wie liebst du mich. So liebt die Lerche Gesang und Luft und Morgenblumen den Himmelsduft, wie ich dich lebe mit Farbenblut, die du mir Jugend und Freud und Mut zu neuen Liedern und Tänzen gibst. Sei ewig glücklich, wie du mich liebst, sei ewig glücklich, wie du mich liebst, sei
Hi guys, I just wanted to introduce myself since you won't see me in the videos. My name is Andrea Mutz. I'm a pianist from Romania and I have been living in Houston for about 10 years now. I think these are really difficult times for everyone, but it is especially hard for musicians because we can't safely get together and do what we love, perform. So I was really grateful that Opera on Tap invited me to be part of this project because it allowed me to rediscover the joy of learning new music and, diving in and getting ready for this kind of performance, even though it can only be a virtual collaboration at this point. But anyway, it's shifting my focus from this crazy world out there back to my art form that brings me so much joy. And speaking of crazy world, I just returned from a 4-month trip in Europe. I went there in March and I was supposed to be there for a week, but then the travel ban happened, so I got stuck there. I ended up visiting 6 more countries just trying to make my way back here. So I went to Ireland, the UK, Hungary, Romania, Bulgaria, and Turkey. But I'm finally here. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this performance and please support Opera on Tap if you're able to. Stay safe.
Louisana returns to sing our next piece, taken from the text of Goethe's masterpiece, the infamous play about a man who sells his soul to the devil, Faust. This song, though, has little to do with the actual plot of Faust because it's taken instead from a storytelling scene within the play, or it's like a play within a play. In the play within a play, there lives a king who loves a flea like his own son. He goes as far as to promote the flea and his friends into lords and ladies of the court. And the sycophantic nobility, hoping to please the king and keep their own power, bends to his flea-ridden norms, becoming flea-ridden themselves, as they're forced to share tables with fleas. The final line of the story is a warning to the king, though. The rest of us won't bend so lightly to your new flea norms. Please welcome back Louisana singing Aus Goethes Faust. Oh, that's a fun title to say, isn't it? Try saying it in German. Aus Goethes Faust. Aus Goethes Faust. All right, I'm going to keep going. Louisana, take it away, shall you? Aus Goethes Faust. Aus Goethes Faust.
Es war einmal ein König, der hat einen großen Floh. Den liebt er gar nicht wenig, als wie seinen eigenen Sohn. Da rief er seinen Schneider, der Schneider kam heran, am Messer junge Kleider und meß ihm Hosen an. In Sammet und in Seide war er nur angetan, hatte Bänder auf dem Kleider, hat auch einen Kreuz daran und war sogleich Minister und hat einen großen Stern. Da wurden seine Geschwister bei Hof auf große Herren. Und Herren und Frauen am Hofe, sie waren in sie geplagt, die Königin und die Zofe, gestochen und genagt, und durften sie nicht knicken und weg sie jucken nicht, wir knicken und gesticken, doch gleich wenn einer sticht, wir knicken und ersticken, doch gleich wenn einer stickt, ja wir knicken und ersticken, doch gleich wenn einer stickt, ja wir knicken und ersticken, doch gleich wenn einer stickt, wenn
Thank you, Luisana. Beethoven only wrote one opera, which we will discuss more later. But this next song, which features the only non-German language music on our program tonight, feels especially operatic, perhaps because it's in Italian. Written by Giuseppe Carpani for placement in a magazine, this text exemplifies a peculiar, long tradition among composers in the 1800s, where they would set challenges for one another in periodicals that they knew they all read. In this case, composers were asked to write music to this poem specifically, In questa tomba oscura, which depicts a dead lover scorned in the afterlife, lamenting the fact that only in death is he fully appreciated. Beethoven's setting sticks out from the rest as being especially somber, a slow build that peaks near the end as the bitter spirit watches the ones they left behind. He would go on to write other foreign language works, including English, Italian, and more. Singing In questa tomba oscura, please welcome back mezzo-soprano Abby Pell.
If you have been enjoying tonight's performance, I invite you to consider making a donation to Opera on Tap. We accept donations through our Facebook page and through PayPal and Venmo at Opera on Tap. Information is right there. If you are interested in sponsoring a broadcast like tonight, please reach out to me at Houston@operaontap.com. You can also show your support by liking and following us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter at OOT Houston. Also, show your support to go to Pop-Up Houston to check out amazing installations and ongoing projects such as Queer Cinema from Germany, How to Punk a Revolution. All right, back to the show.
Beethoven was known for composing plenty of music in a multitude of forms, from symphony to art song, but he left behind just one complete opera, Fidelio. The reasons why have been discussed at length, but the most likely culprit, opera is difficult to compose due to the many constraints of the theater, and Beethoven, ever the perfectionist, would spend over 2 decades reworking and revising Fidelio before he finally published the full score. That was well after it had been performed for the first time. The plot of the opera, though, is as fitting for the Romantic era as any. Leonore, a woman, disguises herself as a prison guard named Fidelio in order to rescue her husband from a political prison. In fact, women disguised as, or even playing men in opera, is a time-honored tradition called pants rolls. Meanwhile, Marceline, the daughter of another guard, pines for the disguise whose true identity remains a mystery to her, foreshadowing future conflict when she discovers the truth. Singing Marcelina's pining aria, O Wär ich schon, please welcome Catherine back.
Mit dir vereint und dir ein Mädchen darf ja, was es meint, nur helfen, nur gewinnen. Och, wenn ich nicht erröten muss, um einen warmen Herzenskuss, wenn nichts uns stört auf Erden. Die Hoffnung schon erfüllt die Brust mit unaussprechlich süßer Lust. Wie glücklich will ich werden, wie glücklich will ich werden. Die Hoffnung schon erfüllt die Brust mit unaussprechlich süßer Lust. Wie glücklich, glücklich, glücklich will ich werden. In Ruhe, Stille, Häuslichkeit, erwach ich jeden Morgen. Wir grüßen uns mit Zärtlichkeit, der Fleiß verscheucht die Sorge. Und ist die Arbeit abgetan, dann schleicht die hohle Nacht heran, dann ruhn wir von Beschwerden. Die Hoffnung schon füllt die Brust mit unaussprechlich süßer Lust. Wie glücklich will ich werden, wie glücklich will ich werden. Die Hoffnung schon erfüllt die Brust mit unaussprechlich süßer Lust. Wie glücklich, glücklich, ja, wie glücklich will ich werden. Die Hoffnung schon erfüllt die Brust mit unaussprechlich süßer Lust.
religion remained a fixture for 19th century life in much as it had before then in Europe's history. And the newfound artistic movement of Romanticism inspired writings about God, including the text of this next piece, Buslied, or literally Song of Repentance, written by Christian Gellert. While not especially devout, Beethoven was a Catholic, and in his usual dramatic style, he set this repentant text very well. Slow and dirge-like, the music is a good example of Sturm und Drang, a German literary and musical style within Romanticism that emphasized strong, contrasting emotions and subjectivity over the previous classical era's strict adherence to logic and reasoning. If any composer was the poster boy for Sturm und Drang, it was Beethoven, trust me. Singing Buslied, please welcome back Louisana.
erhebt mein Schrei und nimmt sich meine Seele an.
Beethoven was among the most influential composers in history, and few composers adored him like Franz Schubert. In fact, at age 17, Schubert sold all of his school books just to be able to afford a ticket to Fidelio. Schubert was more of a song composer than an opera composer, though. In fact, although Beethoven wrote the first song cycle, which we'll talk about later, Schubert is credited with popularizing and developing song cycles and Lieder, or German art songs. We've already heard a few German Lieder on this program today. Like most German composers, Schubert was also a big fan of Goethe, and set his poem Wanderers Nachtlied to the tune of a beautiful, soothing lullaby. Goethe's words here depict a soft, intimate, still landscape just at dusk. Singing the Wanderers Nachtlied, please welcome back Abby Powell. As I've mentioned, most of the music you've heard tonight came from Beethoven's middle period, but this next piece he wrote when he was just 25 years old. His youthful enthusiasm is perhaps reflected in the text. Literally titled, I Love You in German, this poem depicts a simple, unabashed, earnest expression of love for another. It has been played at many weddings ever since. Singing Ich liebe dich, please welcome back Luisana Rivas.
Liebe dich so wie du mich am Abend und am Morgen, noch war kein Tag und ich teilten unsere Sorgen. Auch waren
take the final departure from our otherwise mostly Beethoven program this evening with our next song, the second on tonight's concert, which was composed by Franz Schubert. Arguably Schubert's most famous song, El König, or The Elf King, is a thrilling, horrific Goethe poem. The poem features 4 characters: a narrator, a man riding on horseback, his son who is riding beside him, and the evil, invisible, eponymous Elf King, more akin to what today we might call a goblin than an elf. As the boy sees visions of a mad elf king goading him on and threatening him, he begs and pleads his father to stop the horse, who supposes it all to be in his child's imagination. The horse's footsteps can be heard thundering in the piano's frenetic, repetitive accompaniment, setting a disturbing, spooky atmosphere. Schubert provides new dynamics, tempi, and even themes for each character in the story. His text painting is so clear in the music that one almost needs no translation to picture what's happening. We hope you will enjoy mezzo-soprano Abby Powell singing El König.
Reitet so spät durch Nacht und Wind. Es ist der Vater mit seinem Kind. Hat den Knaben wohl in die Arme, fasst ihn sicher, hält ihn warm. Mein Sohn, was birgst du so an dein Gesicht? Siehst Vater, du den Erlenkönig nicht? Den Erlenkönig mit Krone und Schweif. Mein Sohn, es ist ein Nebelstreif. Du liebes Kind, komm, geh mit mir, gar schöne Spiele spiel ich mit dir. Manch bunte Blumen sind an dem Strand, meine Mutter hat manch güldene Wand. Mein Vater, und hörst du nicht, was Erlenkönig mir leise verspricht? Sei ruhig, bleibe ruhig, mein Kind, in dürren Blättern säuselt der Wind. Willst, feiner Knabe, du mit mir gehen, meine Töchter sollen die Fahrten schön, meine Töchter führen den nächtlichen Rhein und wiegen und tanzen und singen dich ein. Sie wiegen und tanzen und singen dich ein. Mein Vater, und siehst du nicht dort, Herr Königstöchter am düstern Ort? Mein Sohn, ich seh es genau, erscheinen die alten Weiden so grau. Ich liebe dich, mich reizt deine schöne Gestalt, und bist du nicht willig, so brauch ich Gewalt. Mein Vater, jetzt fasst mich an, König hat mir ein Leid getan. Dem Vater grausend, reitet geschwind, hält in Armen das süchzende Kind. Reicht den Hof mit Mühe und Not. In seinen Armen das Kind war tot.
Thank you to Abby for that absolutely chilling performance of König. My name is Anna Diemer, and I'm the co-managing diva of personnel and programming for the Houston chapter of Opera on Tap. What this means is that I'm responsible for finding all of these wonderful performers and putting together these fantastic shows for you. If you are a Houston area singer or pianist, we want to collaborate with you. If you're interested in joining our team, feel free to reach out to me via email at anna@operoontap.com. That's ANNA. Or you can shoot us a message on Facebook or Instagram, and we'll be sure to get back to you. For now, if you've been to our in-person shows, you probably recognize me as the person who runs around with the opera hat, and I miss doing that, so I wanted to give you a little taste for our online shows.
In 19th century Germany, individual lieder or songs, like the one you just heard, were very popular and would frequently be sold to eager amateur musicians in collections that had vague titles like 6 songs or 8 songs. In fact, 2 of our previous songs on tonight's program, Buslied and Aus Goethes Faust, you know, the one that's fun to say, both of those songs were each from a separate set called 6 Songs. That's how common these were. These sets were also usually composed of unrelated poems, and were sometimes only grouped together because they were written around the same time. But as composers began to instead group related poems together, they established a new form of song collection, the song cycle. Unlike the previous loosely tied song collections, song cycles are groups of poems with a common theme, often even a narrative through line. While Schubert was known for establishing the song cycle as being mainly a form of storytelling, the first song cycle by a major composer, Beethoven's An die ferne Geliebte, didn't so much tell the chronological parts of the story as it explores the varying emotions of one character experiencing one thing. In this cycle, a young man pines for his love, who is separated from him for an undisclosed reason, although modern scholars have interpreted that reason as being death, and an undetermined amount of time. He doesn't know when he'll see his lover again. This lovelorn theme would set the tone for many song cycles, especially Schubert's. An die ferne Geliebte is shorter than most cycles too, at just 15 minutes, or 6 songs long. Another factor that sets this cycle apart is that An die ferne Geliebte was through composed, meaning there are no pauses between the songs. Similarly, in the recorded performance that you will hear, we will not break between pieces. We will experience the full 15-minute song cycle at once and applause at the end. Singing An die ferne Geliebte, please welcome tenor Benjamin Boskoff.
Im Hügel sitz ich spähend in das blaue Nebenland, nach den fernen Triften sehend, wo ich dich Geliebte fand. Weit bin ich von dir geschieden, trennend liegen Berg und Tal, zwischen uns und unserem Frieden, unserem Glück und unsere Qual. Ach, den Blick kannst du nicht sehen, der zu dir so blind eilt, und die Seufzer, sie verwehen in dem Raume, der uns teilt. Will dann nicht mehr zu dir dringen, nicht der die dir klagen meine Pein. Denn voll Liebesklang entweichet jeder Raum und jede Zeit, und ein liebend Herz erreichet, was ein liebend Herz geweiht. Vor die Berge so blau, aus dem nebligen Grau schauen herein, wo die Sonne verglüht, wo die Wolke umzieht, möchte ich sein, möchte ich sein. Dort im ruhigen Tal schweigen Schmerzen und Qual, wo im Gestein still die Bremel dort sind, weht so leise der Wind, möchte ich sein, möchte ich sein. Hin zu seligen Wald trägt mich Liebesgewalt, innere Pein, ach, mich töcht nicht von hier, könnt mich traute bei dir ewig sein, ewig sein. Leichter Segler in den Höhen und du Bächlein klein und schmal, könnt mein Liebchen ihn erspähen, grüßt sie viel tausendmal. Seht ihr Wolken, seht dann gehen, sehnend in dem stillen Tal, lass mein Bild von ihr entstehen in dem lüft'gen Himmelssaal. Wird sie an den Büschen stehen, die nun herbstlich falb und kahl, klagt ihr, wie mir ist geschehen, klagt ihr Vöglein meine Qual. Stille Weste bringt den Wehen hin zu meiner Herzenswahl, meinen Seufzer, die vergehen wie der Sonne letzter Strahl. Fließt ihr zu mein Himmelsfliehen, lasst sie Bächlein klein und schmal, treu in deine Wogen ziehen meine Tränen ohne Zahl, ohne Zahl. Diese Wolken in den Höhen, dieser Vöglein untere Zug, werden dich umholenden ziehen. Nehmt mich mit dem leichten Flug. Diese Wester werden spielen, schätzen dir Umfang und Brust, in der seidenen Locken wühlen. Teilt ich mit euch diese Lust. Hin zu der von jenen Hügeln sich dieses Bächlein eilt, wird ihr Bild sich in dir spiegeln. Fließt zurück, dann unverweilt, fließt zurück, dann unverweilt, ja unverweilt. erschöpfst, die dich öffnen Urinen. Die Schwalbe, die kehret zum wirtlichen Dach, sie baut sich so emsige bräutlich gemacht. Die Liebe so wandelnd reden, die Liebe so wandelnd reden. Sie bringt sich geschäftig von Kreuz und von quer, manch weicheres Stück zu dem Brauweib hierher, manch wärmendes Stück für die Kleinen. Nun wohnen die Gatten beisammen so treu, was Winter geschieden, verbannt und herbei, was liebt, das weiß er zu weinen, was liebt, das weiß er zu weinen. Es kennt der Wein, es blüht die Au, die Lüfte sie wild, so milde, so lau, nur ich kann nicht ziehen von ihnen. Wenn alles, was Liebe der Frühlings vereint, nur unsere Liebe kein Frühlings erscheint, und Tränen sind dann ihr Gewinn, und Tränen sind dann ihr Gewinn. Ja, an ihr Gewinn. Nimm sie hin, denn diese Lieder, die ich dir Geliebte sang, singe sie dann abends wieder zu der laute, süßen Klang. Wenn das Dämmerungsrot dann zieht nach dem stillen blauen See und sein letzte Strafe gibt, hinter jenen dein liebend Herz erreichet, was ein liebend Herz geweiht. Und dein liebend erreichet, was ein liebend Herz geweiht. Dann vor dieser liebend hätt erreicht, was ein liebend Herz geweiht. Was ein liebend Herz geweiht.
For our final song of the evening, we welcome back mezzo Abby Powell, who will sing Das Liedchen von der Ruhe, or translated literally, A Little Song of Unrest. I always think that title's a little cute. This text is a quiet celebration of death, viewing death less as a tragedy and more of a longed-for release from the pains of life. Beethoven's setting feels like an appropriate mix between these two conflicting emotions of the sorrow of death and the freedom of release. Before I hand it over to Abby, Opera on Tap Houston would like to once again thank pianist Andrea Moot, Goethe Pop-Up Houston, and our team of 4 fantastic singers, and of course, viewers like you. I've always wanted to say that, viewers like you. If you enjoyed tonight's virtual show and need more to sustain your spirit during these difficult times, then we encourage you to like and follow us here on Facebook. You can also find us on Twitter and Instagram at OOT Houston on both platforms. And for our next shows, please mark your calendars. August 21st at 8 p.m., we will be virtual with What Makes Me the Artist I Am Today. This is an exciting program where the singers will get to choose the pieces and discuss a little bit with us about why they chose those pieces, too. On September 25th at 8, you can join us for Bach to School, a performance featuring opera's most educational arias. Once again, thanks for tuning in. We hope you had a wonderful time, and that you'll join us again in a month. With all this said, take it away, Abby.
Ruhe
Thank you for watching. Make sure to mark your calendars for our upcoming events August 21st and September 25th for What Makes Me the Artist I Am Today and Back to School. Donations are kindly accepted at Opera on Tap on Facebook, Venmo, and at paypal.me/Opera on Tap. Also, make sure to like, follow, and subscribe to us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter at OOT Houston. Y'all have a great night.